and welcome to the latest episode of the Early Years Insight. I'm Kathy Leatherbarrow from Eden, and today we are talking to Nick Johnson, a curriculum lead here at Eden. And we're here to talk about thought leadership. Do you want to start by explaining what thought leadership is?
Yeah, sure, yes, thanks Kathy. Well, it's a number of things really, thought leadership. Generally speaking, it refers to sort of leading the conversation or influencing a community's way of thinking about a subject area. So for early years managers, for example, it's really about how they position themselves as an expert in early childhood studies. So someone who might manage a setting may also shape the narrative on early years, issues, practices, policies, etc. And it's a key way of influencing, policymakers, decision makers within the early years industry.
Yeah, because I think sometimes, particularly nursery managers, they're so involved in their setting and the day-to-day running of their setting, making sure all the children are well cared for, that all their individual needs are met, that staff are well trained and informed to meet those needs and, increase the quality of the care of the children that they're looking after. Yeah. They sometimes forget that they've got a wider picture, haven't they, to that they can influence within early years, outside of their setting and be a part of.
Well, I mean, it's as you know, it's a huge role. It's a very important role. Early years education. It's so important because it's the formative years of a child. There's preparation there to get them into primary education, and it's so important. But sometimes I think they may feel that they work in isolation, that what happens in their setting kind of stays in their setting. And in fact, to be a good thought leader, it's about contributing to the collective knowledge around early years, and their knowledge is really pivotal. Yeah. To making changes and influencing changes within the industry. Yeah. So it's such an important role.
Yeah, and that's, we always probably encourage managers to network, although they see other nurseries within their local community as competition.
Yeah.
Ultimately, they are networking opportunities to, louden their voice within the sector, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, children move around, they are transient, the world is transient, where a child might not necessarily stay in that setting for the whole span of their early education. They may move to a different setting for a variety of reasons. It could be because their parents have moved, or the family have moved elsewhere, or they need a different type of education. So I think that shared knowledge can improve practice. It can support that child's, integration into that new setting.
Yeah.
And there's many things that they can share, through writing articles, speaking at conferences, speaking at local, on a local level. They may be part of a network of early years settings, and being able to sort of lead, some of those conversations and share innovative practices is really, really important, and can help shape what they do as well as an organisation.
Yeah, because I think at the moment a lot of local authorities' funding and budgets, gone down, haven't they? Because if you think, if I think back to 10, 15 years ago, every local authority had a thriving early years department that provided a lot of support for settings and practitioners, a lot of training, and that is just dwindled away throughout the years because of budget restrictions. In some local authorities it's really minimal, the support that they're getting. So they've got to create that themselves, haven't they, and be build it themselves and create those networks themselves and reach out to one another and build on everybody's knowledge and experience.
Yeah, it's almost a community of practice, and that's essentially, a community of practice will comprise of a number of different thought leaders who might have expertise in one area. So, as an early years setting, you may have somebody that has a specialist knowledge, of child development or curriculum development, or how to engage with parents effectively, or how to engage with other stakeholders effectively. And not every early setting manager is an expert at all those different things. So sharing that insight and that education as a community of practice can really support not just their nursery, but all the other sort of nursery and early years settings.
Absolutely.
To create an all-round better quality of education.
So what steps do you think people can take to build on their expertise?
Well, I think it's important, as I say there, the sharing of knowledge is important, because as I say, you can't always be an expert at everything. So I think, getting involved in networking where possible, getting involved in local initiatives where they can share their knowledge and insights on early years education is really important. Building expertise, I mean, I know you just mentioned that. Sometimes it may be that there isn't always time for CPD, but looking at some smaller areas initially and building up expertise, so this could be through professional development opportunities to build their expertise. It could be doing some advanced qualifications, engaging in workshops that might be available within the networks, doing some online courses, or just doing things like a research paper, for example. So you might look at a specific area of early years development that you want to research. So there's lots of different opportunities to get into that.
And I suppose it's important for managers and leaders particularly to take time for themselves in this area as well, isn't it? Because they're very conscious of increasing the knowledge, skills and abilities of their staff team, where they become sort of stagnant in a way because they've put all their efforts into their staff and their team and not necessarily, building that for themselves as well, isn't it?
And I think sometimes some of that professional development could be focused around their leadership. So there are qualification short courses, podcasts that they can listen to that can support them. One particular model that really does work in early years education is servant leadership, and that empowers the team to take on responsibilities and feel that they are being supported.
It creates ownership,
and it creates a bit of ownership, which could create that extra time that they need to spend on researching areas. So hands-on experience is really useful as well, particularly for thought leaders. It could be leading projects, so they may get themselves involved in some sort of project within their own organisation or within a network, where they might look at perhaps mentoring other leaders or becoming a mentee of other leaders within the sector and out of the sector as well. So there's lots of opportunities out there to to build that expertise.
It's pushing yourself out your comfort zone, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And over sort of time, those experiences will help them build a better and richer understanding of their sector, and that in itself can help them to then inform the sector.
So so we just touched slightly there on the impact that it can make. So why is it important?
Well, we could probably argue that early years education is probably the most important stage of a child's life in having that.
I think all us early years professionals would say that it is, isn't it?
Well, it is, because it is preparing them, for formal education, if you like.
It's creating those essential building blocks,
and it's creating those building blocks,
ready for future learning.
The impact is crucial, and thought leaders within that area have made great impacts by informing professionals about how important it is and the changes they can make and the different ways that they can educate children. What we know through issues during the COVID crisis was that a lot of parents were taking on ownership of a lot of the education of children, particularly at primary level, and that put a great strain on parents, but it also put a great strain on on the schools when the children returned.
And that's still being seen,
And
isn't
it's still,
it?
the knock-on effect is still being seen.
Yeah,
So,
'cause, I've recently been looking at school readiness, because obviously it's the summertime. School readiness is spoken about a lot, and I was reading an article, only this week, that the percentage of children that aren't what we would consider school ready, and it's because of the impact still on that COVID phase that we're all still talking about now, on children's social skills, communication and language, and their independence and self-care skills, as in there's a high percentage of children turning up for reception that are still wearing nappies, so it's having a long, profound effect on children, isn't it? It shows how important early years practitioners, their role within those children's first few years of life, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so important. I mean, thought leaders in the sector can shape public opinion. They can shape government policies, because obviously it was an unprecedented thing to happen worldwide.
Yeah.
And there's still a lot to be learnt about that, because we're still in that phase where we're coming out of...
We're in recovery,
We're in
aren't
recovery
we?
almost.
Yeah.
And so now, more than any, there is a requirement for people with expertise to inform the policymakers and the decision makers about what is the right steps to take, because we're still recovering, as you say, from the after effects of that.
Because the percentage of children that required speech and language input after that went off the scale almost, and rightfully so, because parents did the best, didn't they? We all did our best, but there's lots of areas for nursery practitioners and managers to work with now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great shout on the speech and communication thing, because children were isolated, obviously, and fairness, they were probably isolated in a place of care and support. But if you take children away from children, then they're going to lose that speech and communication.
Absolutely.
Naturally, they'll, I mean, even as a professional educator, it was very difficult educating my child at home.
I held my hands up. I found that tough.
And I thought, if anybody, myself and my wife, who's also works in education, we'd be great at it. But actually, it was very, very difficult.
It was tough, wasn't it?
It was very tough. But, and again, from my perspective, it's helped me to understand, because a lot of the work I do is with learners that are online.
Yeah.
So it's helped me to sort of, understand what that really feels like as somebody working from home and educating online.
Yeah.
And it's helped my practice by going through that as well.
Yeah, it's very different, isn't it, learning at home in a familiar, comfortable environment than it is than going to a classroom.
Of course it is, yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I suppose children need a sense of knowing where they are and who they're with, and learning from each other. And obviously,
they get that enriched vocabulary, don't they?
Of course they do.
Even if it's just babble with one another, during play, it's enriching their vocabulary, and they're learning to communicate in different ways, aren't they?
Absolutely.
And that was just all taken away.
It was. So, there's a lot of work still to be done, and there's lots of gaps in knowledge, which I think, early years managers might be able to support the government, policymakers, decision makers in moving forward.
So how can we encourage managers to do that?
I think it's, without doubt, the managers are passionate and knowledgeable, and it's about turning that into something tangible. So I think certainly the first steps are building a network, not seeing other settings as necessarily their competitors, but their collaborators. And sharing that insight, I think initially is really important. Sharing insights, you could even do that in very micro formats, such as writing blogs, engaging in social media channels, But it's about being consistent and authentic about
Or even just
your communication.
Even
really.
just replying to some blogs that people have put online.
Correct.
You
Yeah.
don't have to write the blog yourself, do you? You
No.
can just reply to it and engage in the conversation.
Exactly. There's lots of parent networks online.
Yeah.
There's one that comes to mind, but I won't name it because it's very divisive. But even going onto those can help gather a bit of insight about what are the challenges that children are facing at the moment.
And, what are parents coming up against?
Exactly.
Because you think about it, you go, because I remember when I brought my first child home, and I remember putting her on the floor in a car seat in the lounge and just standing there looking at her thinking, what do I do now? And thinking, I should know this. But it's overwhelming, isn't it? The sense of responsibility. And they don't come with a manual. Everybody needs help and support, don't they?
Yeah.
And it's just about being aware of that, isn't it? And how you can influence that and support that as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what kind of steps and hints and tips can you give people?
I think first of all, it's to think what they want. As an early years leader, what do I want to get involved in? What's most important to me personally as an educator? But secondly, what's most important? What's our most important priority as a setting?
Yeah.
So first of all, think about that. Perhaps discuss that with your team, because I think it's important that they're involved in that as well. And then going out and seeking opportunities to learn more. Perhaps write and share your thoughts and feelings, and look at ways where maybe you can start to create content to share with other practitioners and other experts in the field. That would be my first step.
Yeah.
And as I say, behind that would be, looking at some CPD opportunities to develop your own sort of knowledge in that area.
Yeah, because I think although we are trying to share practice, and it's not necessarily sharing what your strengths are, but identifying what you and your setting need most, isn't
Exactly.
it? And and gaining that information and knowledge as well, and and sharing it along the way.
It's very difficult to anticipate the future, and knowing what's coming next, what potential hurdles or challenges are coming next. But I think by collaborating and networking with others, it may give you some insights into those areas. And as an early years manager and as an early years educator, the impact of what you do is so important.
Yeah.
And sharing that, and sharing insights and gaining reflective insights can help not just support you as an individual, but can support your the children that are in your care, not just now, but obviously in the future. But also help to drive some changes in the future. Thought leadership's led to lots of different things, and thought leaders have had impact on things like funding around nurseries and education.
But they can also link it to their self-evaluation as well, can't they? In terms of, rather than thinking, right, where do I go with this thought leadership? It's, bring it back to your self-evaluation, what your strengths, what your weaknesses, where are your areas for improvement, and start there. Yeah. For example, it could just be something as simple as outdoor play.
Exactly.
If you've not got a very large area for outdoor provision, that might be your area of, right, I need to increase this, I need to look at how I provide a better outdoor enriching environment without necessarily having the space.
Yeah.
And there's loads of ways to do that.
Of course.
But then it's running with that, isn't it, as a staff team as well, on how you increase the quality of your provision and what you offer through your staff, and then your thought leadership around that, isn't it?
Yeah, so I mean that could just be a very simple project.
Yeah.
But again, without networking, without finding out about other nurseries or other early year settings that have the same challenges, it would really help to enrich what you do.
Absolutely.
So I think it's
it gives you
a great point.
Yeah, and it boosts you along quicker as well, doesn't it? You don't have to do all that groundwork first.
Exactly.
If you reach out and share thoughts and ideas.
Yeah, and it could be that your setting has managed to overcome a specific challenge, and you could be sharing that as well within your network to support others that might be facing that same challenge.
Yeah. And it doesn't always necessarily have to be a registered network, does it?
No.
There's lots of other, you don't have to sign up to different organisations.
You create your own network by just looking in the local area, looking at who the settings are and what they do and bringing them together. Yeah,
and there's lots of ways to do that now, isn't there? Through social media platforms and, it's very easily done, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So, there's lots of influence that you could have. As I was saying, it's led to things like funding decisions made around funding.
Can you give an example of one of that?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's that one. I mean, another one is...
Because people will hear funding and think, how do I do that? How do I create and attract some funding?
Perhaps a different example is apprenticeships. So... the apprenticeships that we offer at Eden and lots of other childcare educational institutes offer are very much based on the insights that they've gained from skill sectors, for example. And people that get involved in that and defining the standard are people that work in that industry.
Yeah.
So, the standards that are required, the occupational standards, aren't derived from a government necessarily, but they look for experts to join groups to determine what the standard will be. And that's a great way of, or a great example of how thought leaders within early education have defined a standard or a way of working or occupational standard that all earlier settings should be adhering to.
Yeah.
So that's a great example of how they've got involved. Thought leaders have provided information to the government about, the challenges that the parents face around getting their children into nursery. Yeah. And that's determined things, supportive things such as in the past we've had nursery vouchers, for example, and a system of being able to pay through the government gateway.
Yes.
So lots of these things are influenced by people that work or own nurseries or own early years settings or manage them. So there's lots of government changes that can be driven from the coal face.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your time, Nick. It's been interesting chatting to you today.
Thank you.
And we'll look forward to the next episode.
Thank you.